Oh, we don't have cameras. This happens too often when switching between Zoom and Ecamm Live. See what happens? There we are. I'm pushing all the buttons, being like, "Why am I not coming?" And it, yeah, hello, everyone. Um, my name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. We have a nice round of stories for you this evening. Before I start, I want to thank all my Cameron Journal Plus members for checking in with me this week. I am so sorry that the newsletter did not come out this weekend. It WordPress managed to miss its schedule again, so the newsletter literally went out like right now. Um, and so it's a difficult thing. I learned an interesting thing about WordPress today, and that was the fact that it it will miss its schedule and not do stuff if there's no traffic on the site, like at the moment the thing is supposed to trigger, which was an interesting thing that I did not know, which I found a little bit frustrating, sort of thing. But I tried to fix from ChatGPT, and I'm looking at it right now, and it looks like the fix did not work. So that's fun. um, we love that. But anyway, big shout out to Cameron Journal Plus subscribers. If you're wondering where the Cameron Journal newsletter is, it should hopefully be in your inboxes shortly, as I literally sit here trying to make it send out and actually. It's Monday, and it's been a Monday. Yeah, that was an uncomfortable thing to wait, because it's supposed to go out on Saturday. There's usually a newsletter every Saturday. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, go to CameronJournal.com/newsletter and and check that out. If you want to become a Cameron Journal Plus member, make sure to go to CameronJournal.com/subscribe and set up. It's $45 for the year. You get access to the Discord and all sorts of fun stuff. If you're already on Substack and you would like select things from the Cameron Journal to be sent to you via Substack or subscribe there, you can do so. Good news for you. You can do so at CameronJournal.com/substack. So, with all the housekeeping out of the way, I want to start off this evening by talking about the AWS outage. So, half the internet isn't working today. If you're watching this on Twitch, you should be lucky right now, because again, half the internet's not working today. So, if you do have something functional online, like even this show, you're very lucky. If you're ever wondering all the places you can watch this show, CameronJournal.com/newshour. But I tried. There's a bunch of stuff in the automations that do my social media stuff. I can't fix any of it right now. Everything is done. People can't get into their home security cameras. Like, AWS powers a lot of things, and with its outage, it's just kind of it's just kind of a mess. But we're here and on YouTube, so if you shout out to Google Cloud Services. We're here on YouTube, so you can at least watch us on that. So, but thank you all for coming this evening. AWS is out, but we have more important news stories to talk about. And I want to dive right in to the weekend's No Kings protest. Let's do this. Here we are. And, so nationwide, there were protests throughout the whole country, protesting against the Trump administration. It says here, according to Politico, it's the third mass mobilization since Donald Trump's return to the White House. It says here that large crowds of protesters marched and rallied in cities across the U.S. Saturday for No Kings demonstrations, decrying what participants see as the government's swift drift into authoritarianism under President Donald Trump. People carrying signs with slogans such as "Nothing is more patriotic than protesting" or "Resist fascism" packed into New York City's Times Square and rallied by thousands in parks in Boston, Atlanta, and Chicago. I did see somewhere else, not in this story, it was 7 million people across 2,700 locations. So, not necessarily, massive turnout, depending on where you are. It says demonstrators marched through Washington, downtown Los Angeles, and picketed outside capitals in several Republican-led states, a courthouse in Billings, Montana, and at hundreds of smaller public spaces. Trump's Republican Party disparaged the demonstrations as Hate America rallies, and by Trump's Republican Party they really mean J.D. Vance, anyway. But in many places the events looked more like a street party. There were marching bands, huge banners with the U.S. Constitution's We the People, that was in L.A., preamble that people could sign, and demonstrators wearing inflatable costumes, particularly frogs, which have emerged as a sign of resistance in Portland, Oregon. It was the third mass mobilization since Trump's return to the White House and came against the backdrop of a government shutdown that has not only closed federal programs and services, but is testing the core balance of power as an aggressive executive confronts Congress and the courts in ways that protest organizers warn are a slide towards authoritarianism. In Washington, Iraq War Marine veteran Sean Howard said he'd never participated in a protest before, but was motivated to show up because of what he sees as the Trump administration's disregard for the law. He said immigration detentions without due process and deployments of troops in U.S. cities are un-American, alarming signs of eroding democracy. I fought for freedom and against this kind of extremism abroad, said Howard, who added that he also worked at the CIA for 20 years on counterterrorism operations. And now I see a moment in America where we have extremists everywhere who are, in my opinion, pushing us into some kind of civil conflict. Trump, meanwhile, was spending the weekend in his Mar-a-Lago home in Florida. Quote, they say they're referring to me as a king. I'm not a king, unquote, the president said in a Fox News interview that aired early Friday before he departed for a $1 million per plate MAGA Inc. fundraiser at his club. The Trump campaign social media account mocked the protest by posting a computer-generated video of the president clothed like a monarch wearing a crown and waving from a balcony. In San Francisco, hundreds of people spelled out no king and other phrases with their bodies on Ocean Beach. Haley Wingard, who was dressed as the Statue of Liberty, said she too had never been to a protest before. Only recently she began to view Trump as a, quote, dictator, unquote. Quote, I was actually okay with everything until I found out the military invasion in Los Angeles and Chicago and Portland. Portland bothered me the most, because I'm from Portland. I don't want the military in my cities. That's scary, Wingard said. That tens of thousands of people gathered in Portland for a peaceful demonstration downtown. Later in the day, tensions grew as a few hundred protesters and counter-protesters showed up at a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement building, with federal agents at times firing tear gas to disperse the crowd and city police threatening to make arrests if demonstrators block streets. The building has been the site of mostly small nightly protests since June, the reason the Trump administration has cited for trying to deploy the National Guard troops in Portland, which a federal judge has at least temporarily blocked. About 3,500 people gathered in Salt Lake City outside the Utah state capitol to share messages of hope and healing after a protester was fatally shot during the city's first No Kings March in June. And more than 1,500 people gathered in Birmingham, Alabama, evoking the city's history of protests and the critical role it played in the civil rights movement 2 generations ago. Quote, it just feels like we're living in an America that I don't recognize, unquote, said Jessica Yother, a mother of 4. She and other protesters said they felt camaraderie by gathering in a state where Trump won nearly 65% of the vote last November. It was so encouraging, Yother said. I walked in and thought, here are my people. Big rallies like this give confidence to people who have been sitting on the sidelines but are ready to speak up, Democratic U.S. Senator Chris Murphy said in an interview with the Associated Press. While protests earlier this year against Elon Musk's cuts in Trump's military parade drew crowds, organizers say this one is uniting the opposition. Top Democrats such as Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Independent Senator Bernie Sanders are joining what organizers view as an antidote to Trump's actions, from the administration's clampdown on free speech to its military-style immigration raids. More than 2,600 rallies are planned Saturday, organizers said. The National March against Trump and Musk this spring had 1,300 registered locations, while the first No Kings Day in June registered 2,100. We're here because we love America, Sanders said. We're here because we love America, Sanders said, addressing the crowd from a stage in Washington. He said the American experiment is, quote, in danger, unquote, but under Trump it insisted, quote, we the people will rule, unquote. And it goes on to some other small details. But anyway, those are the protests this weekend. This is rather hilarious. The inflatable costumes thing is kind of funny. Leave it to the left to come up with the most weird way to, protest. And the thing I love about this mess, this is very Italian, very French-esque. In a lot of Italian and French protests, you see these big sort of papier-mâché plaster masks, quick, easy to make, all this type of thing. And I love that our protests now have a European flair, sort of thing. It's a quite nice thing. And yeah, so it's good. This is in downtown Seattle in South Lake Union, actually. So it was an interesting thing. The protests were nonviolent. There was no kind of crazy things beyond the usual kerfluffle at the ICE detention facility in Portland. So it was a positive weekend, and I think it's interesting from a narrative perspective that the narrative is focusing on all the people from the sidelines that are coming out, all the people from MAGA who are unhappy with the direction are coming out, all this type of thing, and it actually blends quite well into this story right here from Christopher Webb, and this clip from Joe Rogan, um, which gets into ICE and immigration. Let's watch. We'll talk.
I did not I did not ever anticipate seeing that on TV on a regular basis.
Me either, man. Me either. It's shocking.
I really thought they were just going to go after the criminals. I really thought there was enough gang members and enough people, MS-13 members and whatever they were looking for, that they're wanted. They would go after those guys.
I'll say authoritarianism.
Yeah.
You see how authoritarianism, when it begins to emerge, it's not like it's like non-consensual.
If you've been robbing people for the last 10 years and you're an illegal, you have to leave the country, right? That makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you've been here for 25 years, you have a family, your kids go to school here, you speak the language, you're just illegal. But you're a contributing member to the community that up until now has been protected. This is crazy to ask lower income and middle income people who are, you know, kind of getting by, and then all of a sudden you're about to ship them to a country where they've never been. They haven't been since they were 4.
Yeah.
And you're gonna pull up their family and pull up, and they've been in the community like that. That shows no heart. And that's the problem. Like, you're not going to get any reasonable people to want to go along with that. Any kind person would look at that and go, this can't be the only way to do this.
Damn right. But you see, once authoritarianism starts creeping in and it makes some inroads, which it's definitely making right now, man.
I mean, I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. I'm not surprised that, like, everyone's finally coming around to this, you know, to realizing what's really going on here. And when it comes to the hardened criminal sort, you're not going to find anybody who's kind of like, yes, hardened criminals, send them our way. But I think Joe makes the distinction. In this way, Joe Rogan continues to be the median voter. In so much as Joe Rogan makes a great point that people thought it's like, oh, we're going to gather the gang members and the really bad criminals and get them out of here and that'll be better. No one was imagining that they were going to be gathering up, you know, Maria Garcia, who's been in the community for 25 years. Her friends probably didn't even know she was an illegal immigrant. You know, she's been here doing all this type of thing. She's not been to, you know, whatever country she came from since she was 4. Yeah, no one ever thought, but that's who's getting around it, because the reality on the ground, and if you don't believe me, you can go talk to Homan in Homeland Security about this, because he's talked about this. The real problem is there aren't necessarily enough of those hardened criminals to gather up. They've never met the numbers that they were hoping to. Like, Stephen Miller goes on Fox News and elsewhere, is kind of like 100,000 immigrants a month. And the way they've been trying to accomplish that is by raiding the Home Depot parking lot. And you can say, oh, well, they haven't been here that long. They don't speak the language, all this type of thing. Okay, that's fine. All of this is why Reagan did amnesty in 86. That's kind of my greater point, is the reason everyone wonders, how did Reagan, a Republican, do an amnesty in 86? Because of this exact dynamic here. There were lots of people who, and this even gets into, you know, DACA recipients, all this sort of thing. The reality is there's a lot of people who showed up here as children, as young adults. They've been, you know, other than the fact that they were not born on this land, been fine, upstanding citizens, all this type of thing, doing their thing, so on and such forth. The only real issue is that they don't have legal status in this country. And most people don't know that's not even actually a crime, it's a civil offense. The only time it's prosecuted is it's a federal misdemeanor and is very rarely actually prosecuted all the way through. Most of the time, it's actually something you can like be written a ticket for, a citation, and then you can be deported after that, especially if they find you in an airport or a border crossing or whatever have you. And that's the way the law's written. Now, that may be cause for reform. And certainly maybe we should reform that law and maybe lower the boom a bit. Immigration is something on which I'm very concerned about. But this dynamic, this situation is exactly why we got the amnesty in 86. I say we, I wasn't a part of it, wasn't even born yet. Why we as a country had the amnesty in 86 is because of this dynamic. There were lots of people who, for all intents and purposes, are American, but for paperwork, bureaucracy, if you will. And that was one of the reasons the amnesty in 86 was so successful. And there were a lot of people who led really great lives after that because of this exact social dynamic. The part for me that frustrating is a year ago during the election, it was, we're going to get the immigrants out of here. We're going to finally clean up the country, solve these problems, you know, get rid of make America for America, America first. Then all of a sudden they're finding out. It's like with the Politico story. Oh, that's really scary. Oh, I never thought they'd do this. Oh, I never thought they'd do that. This seems authoritarian. Yeah, we tried to tell you. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't enforce immigration laws in this country. We most certainly should. There's a lot of people who are well deserving of being deported. Hell, the last president who was the king of deportations was Obama. 23 million people in 8 years. I mean, it can be done, especially when you follow a process, look for real criminals, do some old-fashioned investigating police work, not necessarily run around town in an unmarked van with some fellows and grab people off the road. I mean, there's a way to do it and do it in volume. Ask the Obama people. They were real good at it. You can do this, and not in a way that's going to overturn the whole country and give authoritarian vibes with troops marching in cities and all this type of thing. But this is the problem is... And this, we see this with Viktor Orban in Hungary. We see this with Erdogan in Turkey. Is when people get frustrated with. Thank you so much for the like. When people get frustrated with the system, when they get frustrated with institutions not being responsive, when they get frustrated with too many things changing in their country, and someone comes along and says, oh, I'll fix it, I'm the solution, and they're kind of like, well, thank God someone's willing to do something, let's vote for that guy, after years of things sort of not happening. It's almost never does that end well. When your country has reached that point, the person who comes along and is like, I can solve all your problems, I can fix all these issues, everything's going to be great and grand, usually, typically, that's not going to end well for the country involved. That typically is going to end up with a lot of authoritarian crackdowns, limitations of right, limitations of the press and media, all this sort of thing. That's where that goes. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, you're going too far, you're crying wolf too loud. It's been 9 months. And Joe Rogan's already saying, well, I didn't think it'd go like this, man. Well, people tried to tell you, but whatever. You know, you're already 9 months in. Imagine where we're going to be at next year. And the year after that. And the year after that. Thank you so much for the like. This is for openers. This is the appetizer. It can get a whole lot worse. And it can start to affect your everyday life as a citizen. Everyone thought I was crazy when I said I will keep my passport in my handbag at all times. And everyone thought I was overreacting. Now, admittedly, I tend to live in an area where I don't think those problems are ever going to really reach us because we kind of live out of the way. But as a matter of precaution, especially as someone who has out-of-state car plates right now, all this type of thing, like, yeah. You know? It's you know, these are things and problems that are actively happening in places that we now have to think about, and it can get a whole lot worse. I don't know what he thought was going to happen beyond, oh, we're just going to arrest a bunch of criminals and that'll clean out the immigrants. It's like, no, I mean, okay, I get what you're with that, and yes, I want to arrest the criminals too, but the reality is when you start this process of, you know, mass deportations and clean everybody out and all this type of thing with no process, with no, real anything to go along with that to make sure they really, do have problems and are real criminals and all this type of thing. Then you end up with just kind of any old buddy getting grabbed. And I think it's also important that for a certain part of the right, led mostly by Stephen Miller, there are these people who believe, in the quote unquote heritage Americans. There's definitely some, this country is for the whites undertones that backs up a lot of the messaging and thoughts about this that I think a lot of people don't even really acknowledge because it doesn't get out there enough. It's not really making it through the algorithm. But one of the things, like on Twitter, you don't have to look very far for it to pop up. You don't have to look very far to see and hear that type of language. And that's kind of the next logical step. And this is, it's like in Nazi Germany, when they were arresting the disabled, the homosexuals, the mentally ill, all this type of thing, everyone was kind of like, you know what, it's not so bad. Yeah, they're kind of a burden, get them out of here. And then the communists, well, communism is terrible, we don't want any communists, get rid of them too. And then it was trade unionists. Oh, wait, that's my buddy, that's me. Ooh. People forget Jews were the last. By the time the Germans got to the Jews, about 4 or 5 other groups, including the Roma, you'll know them better as gypsies, we don't say that word anymore, but the Roma, the communists, the mentally disabled, homosexuals had all been already sent to camps. One of the reasons they had to keep building larger camps is because the groups that they were taking were much, much larger. And so that's how it starts. So even by the time, the Hitler invades Poland in 1939, most Jews are still, even in annexed Austria and Czechoslovakia, they're still living in Jewish ghettos and cities where they've been all forced to live. The mass removals of, like, in Budapest, in Warsaw don't begin until 1941. So from 1933 when he gets to power to him getting the Jews takes a while. There's a lot of years in there where everyone thought, oh, we'll be fine. No. The reason why we need to be a nation of laws is to make sure that we prevent these exact scenarios from happening. And my worry is that in the zeal of everyone trying to clean up this problem and get rid of it once for all, it has turned into oops, looks like we might have gone too far. Looks like things might have gotten a little out of control. Well, yeah, I mean, kind of. But, that's what happens when you let power go unchecked. And that's the real issue, is that you have power that is going, unchecked, and that's not a good thing, It's not a good thing at all. And this is where maintaining a country of laws is so important. So very important. And it was kind of funny because the title of not the newsletter that I'm still trying to send out as I'm sitting here, but the one of the week before was called Rule of Law. Are we going to be a nation of laws? And that's really, the question is, are we going to be a nation of laws? Because if we are, then we need to act accordingly. If not, then it's dictatorship, quite simply. Which for me personally, I don't really want to live in a dictatorship, but that's just me. Anyway, enough on that. Let's move on. I did find, in lighter news, I did find this very hilarious story. And that is Texas State Rep James Tallarico blames tariffs for high state fair food prices. It says here that Texas State Representative James Tallarico sparked online debate by attributing steep food prices of the Texas State Fair, such as $25 turkey legs and $15 funnel cake chicken sandwiches, to federal tariffs imposed by Washington politicians. Critics argued that prices have been elevated for years due to inflation, vendor cost, and dependent pricing, with fair foods mostly sourced domestically and thus minimally affected by tariffs. The 2025 fair in Dallas saw attendance drop to 2.4 million visitors from 2.6 million the previous year, as some families cited affordability concerns. Someone asked a question, do you think we might have World War III in South instead of Europe? No. World wars only happen when great powers think that they can win something specific, or they think that the potential gain is so much greater than the potential losses. No, everyone's trying to think, oh, this is going to be World War. Everybody wants a World War so damn bad, it's not even funny. I think just because people want some big traumatic thing to happen, so that then there's an after. It's almost, it's like if people need that so to justify, like, how bad things go. So there's a destination, there's finality. That's not how authoritarianism works. That's not the era that we're in. This is a long, slow, banal, to borrow a word from Hannah Arendt, long grind into a system essentially of global oligarchy. I'm going to be Alex Jones for a little minute. The global oligarchs. Like, one of the things that I had mentioned a while ago, to friends only, really, is globally, economically, the wealthy and corporations have looted the developed world pretty much as they can. They've extracted all the wealth that there is there. And so the last kind of cash cow in town is the developed world. And over the last several years, we've seen privatization of a lot of public services, things sold off to make private investors money, all this sort of thing. More so in Europe than here in America, but it's even reached our shores. And what this amounts to is a massive wealth shift from the public to the private sector. I mean, bearing in mind, Elon Musk has 10x'd his wealth in a decade. Okay. Of the $5 trillion we spent on COVID, $2.9 trillion went into the pockets of the wealthy and asset inflation. I mean, it's mind-boggling amounts of money. And I said, I think one of my worries is that when it comes to the exploitation of corporations and the wealthy, of general society, to enrich themselves, that can't be stopped. I think Trump is trying to stop it in his own weird way with the tariffs and everything to kind of slow down what's happening, but I think the ship has already sailed. The global economy is too integrated to live without globalization. Despite the fact I saw an email from Peter Zine who said, get used to not having Chinese manufacturing. Well, Peter, I don't know how you think that's going to happen. We haven't had a textiles industry in 50 years, so I think we're going to have to keep buying clothes from Vietnam. Furniture, too. Oh, and by the way, and I think we're going to be buying electronics from China for a long time. Like, this is it. He's crazy. But I said, I feel the word's too integrated that you can't really undo globalization. It's been 20 years. I fear that we can't stop the wealthy from convincing the government to sell off everything so they can get richer by it and essentially get their tax dollars returned to them via wealth extraction. I don't know that we can stop this now. And what happens, and you've seen this in Russia and elsewhere, is that you end up with a society where you have extremely wealthy people at the top who kind of control everything, and then there's everyone else scraping to get by. There's no big war. There's no big collapse. It's just a long, slow grind to limited rights, limited freedom, and less money, and a lower standard of living. And my great fear is that we are hurtling towards that at lightning speed. And that's something that when, like I was talking with someone about my new book, America's Lost Generation, out now, buy it on Amazon. When I have these conversations, everyone's like, it's a very sad book, it's a very depressing book. Yeah, it is, so have the lives of many millennials been sad and depressing, trying to struggle in, a global competition for jobs, for housing, for everyone else in an when the United States was the center of the global economy, as an average worker trying to navigate that is extremely difficult. It's wonderful if you're wealthy. The upside is tremendous. It's wonderful if you're a VC with deep capital markets, you're trying to start a business, raise money, all this type of thing. If you're just a person who needs a job to live, it is a miserable place to be. And this is why, circling back to Thomas Piketty in his book on capitalism from so many years ago, said, In the 21st century, those who derive their wealth from assets will be richer than those who derive their wealth from labor. And the reality is, people who actually work for a living and and get their money from going to a job every day are going to be increasingly squeezed all over the world. It's going to be barely enough to sort of keep life. If you derive your wealth from assets, houses, stocks, all this type of thing, the number only goes up and to the right. And this is why that fundamental structural shift is why the wealthy will continue to get wealthier and the poor will continue to get poorer. For young people who usually come into this world with you usually arrive, as they need to build a career, they need to build a job, they need to build earnings in order to save, in order to get assets, all this type of thing. That means they never get a chance or opportunity to do that. And when you have mass privatization going on and you have all this wealth being sucked out of the bottom and towards the top, you have even less opportunity because your wages are depressed, your cost of living is going up, so your standard of living is going down. Where do you save money? All this type of thing. This is the dynamic at play. And the tariffs are not helping that situation. But ultimately, no, we're not headed towards World War III. We're headed towards a long, slow grind of authoritarianism with fewer rights, less wealth, and a lower standard of living. Greetings. Thank you for watching. I saw your comment. So, I know people are coming in and out. I think my rant, we lost some viewers after that rant, but that's okay. I wanted to kind of highlight the interesting. We've had James Tallarico. We've mentioned him before, and he's running for U.S. Senate. I think against Ted Cruz, and I will say his video and messaging and talking about the high tariffs and everything is very interesting, considering who it's coming from, where it's coming from, and even though I kind of agree with the experts here, I don't think that high prices at the Texas State Fair are caused by tariffs. I think it's funny that he's trying to tie those two things together to be kind of like, this is an all-American event, but it's not too expensive for normal families. I mean, from a messaging narrative perspective, absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I want to jump over to this really great tweet by Ruth Bengat. I love her. Have for a while, and let's start with this story because Trump has been blowing up gun running boats, quote unquote, in the Caribbean, and it shows here where ships have been positioned in the Caribbean, in U.S. Southern Command, and where some of the interdictions, that's the fancy term for it, are called, what type of bombers and planes they're using, all very technical. I'm not quite sure why they're bombing boats with B-52s. That seems like overkill, but here we are. And so recently they'd blown up a boat, they'd blown up a Trinidadian fishing boat. And it says here that this is no longer just drilling boats on the run. This seems to be like a slow drip march to direct armed conflict in the Americas. Wasn't on my bingo card when we heard the No More Wars America First platform, but here we are and everyone is sleepwalking into it. And the original story is from Ian Ellis. Says here the U.S. announced its 7th strike in Southcom, destroying a boat affiliated with the Colombian cartel. The U.S. has massed 10,000 troops in the region, with most from Puerto Rico and 12 on Navy ships. There's I've gotten a lot of questions from people about we're going to invade Venezuela and cause regime change and all this sort of thing. And it's kind of like, not yet. You don't invade Venezuela with 10,000 troops. Call me when there's 100,000 sitting in Panama. But I think this idea that we, should do more and have more conflict in North and South America is definitely difficult, especially in South America with the drug cartels. And Ruth's comment here, I think, is so prescient about where I think Trump is taking foreign policy. And I think she's absolutely spot on. She says, all part of reducing America to a second-rate power so Xi and Putin can carve up Asia and Eurasia. U.S. military was deterrent for autocrats, so the U.S. will increasingly focus military operations on Latin America and on domestic forever war coin, that's counterintelligence style engagement, at home. And I love the top comment because it said, yeah, in Canada, Greenland, Panama, Argentina, big loan they won't repay, Venezuela, Colombia. Isn't it clear what's going on here? Renamed the Gulf to Gulf of America. It's not a stretch to think Trump thinks he can take over North and South American continents. And so this, I think, there's definitely, and this has been true since the Obama administration. Trump didn't start this. There has definitely been, I think, a retrenchment to home. I think someone in the comments, someone mentioned, "Oh, we're gonna finally do the Monroe Doctrine." Where we start annexing South and Central America. I think the strategy is definitely to have more control in our backyard, to focus on our landmass, North and South America, and kind of leave the Eurasian problems to Eurasia. And obviously the two preeminent powers, well, three preeminent powers on that continent are going to be Russia, China, and the EU. The problem with the EU is they don't have a centralized military, and there's only about 3 countries with anything that one can describe as a real military, and that's the UK, France, and Italy, but mostly naval, not on land. Um, sort of thing. So, as China and Russia split up Asia, they're both going to be salivating at what's going to come of Europe. And obviously Putin wants a great deal more influence in Europe, and he would like a lot of the old Soviet Union back. I would be very worried if I'm Poland, and you can tell they're worried because they're put up fencing and they have checkpoints and they have locked that country down. But I think, yes, I mean, there's been a lot of talk in international relations circles for quite some time that the United States is going to kind of pull back from the globe and focus on North and South America, our own neighborhood, because that's going to be the future, and it's cheaper and it's better. And that's, I mean, the one thing Peter Zine has said that I kind of agree with is there's this big pullback. Trying to run sea lanes for the whole planet and make globalization happen, all this type of thing, is very expensive. I think there is going to be a bit of a pullback, and this is definitely, part of that as well. I don't think it's going to be as easy as they think. So it's very obvious Mexico is not interested in being annexed. I think most of South America would like to not be annexed either. So I'm not really quite sure what the end game is for this, but it is certainly a strategy, and I think it is emblematic of where the Trump administration is taking foreign policy. So it's an interesting thing to look at, with what assets they have in the region and what the growing capabilities are, right here in in the early 20th century. This was definitely an area of operations, especially once we seized Cuba from Spain. But yeah, it will be very interesting to see what the long-term effects of all of this are going to be. But I think Ruth has it right. With the U.S. military was a deterrent for autocrats, and as we pull back towards our own neighborhood, there's going to be a lot less deterrent for that, and that should worry us all. So, in an interesting sort of funding scandal, I found this tweet from Richard Hanania quite helpful. There's a New York Times story too. It says here that Trump targets Democratic districts by halting billions during shutdown. It says here, 2 weeks into the government shutdown, the Trump administration has frozen or canceled nearly $28 billion that had been reserved for more than 200 projects primarily located in Democratic-led cities, congressional districts, and states, according to an analysis by the New York Times. The amount of affected funding for Republican districts, 14, $783 million. Democratic districts, 87, $27.4. Each of these infrastructure projects had received federal aid, sometimes after officials spent years pleading in Washington, only to see that money halted as President Trump has looked to punish Democrats over the course of the fiscal stalemate. The Times conducted its analysis by examining federal funding records, which include details about the city and state where each grant recipient is based. The projects include new investments in clean energy, upgrades to the electric grid, and fixes to the nation's transportation infrastructure, primarily in Democratic strongholds such as New York and California. In some cases, recipients have started to receive portions of the federal aid, only to become casualties in a funding battle that has no end in sight. Mr. Trump's aides have offered a series of explanations for the administration's decision to pause or terminate grants, claiming in some cases the spending would have been wasteful or in conflict with the president's priorities. Since returning to office, Mr. Trump has been particularly aggressive in cutting federal investments to combat climate change. But the budgetary moves coincide with the president's public pledges to use the shutdown to slash spending favored by Democrats. He's described the federal stoppage as an unprecedented opportunity to make some cuts permanent. Many Democrats said the announcements fit a broader pattern at the White House, where Mr. Trump has claimed vast authority to reprogram the nation's budget, even though the Constitution gives that power to Congress. In doing so, Democratic lawmakers said the result could harm their cities and states, upending work that would have helped residents regardless of the political party. The White House did not respond to requests for comment. I thought it was certainly an interesting thing, an idea. In every shutdown, this always happens. I think it's interesting kind of how outsized it all is. I think part of that could be these places tend to be populous and tend to have more things going on, looking for more federal dollars. Ergo, if you're looking to cut things you don't have to pay out during a shutdown, it ends up concentrating itself in California, the West Coast, Chicago, New York area, into New England, all this sort of thing. It could be incidental. It feels intentional. And I think people always focus on how it feels far more than how it's actually, perceived, sort of thing. So, I forgot to put the, put the video thing back on. So it's just me yakking away. But we're gonna have to watch a video, so let me put us back onto that. Here we go. So, but let me set this clip up a little bit. So we found there was a 6-minute story. The DOJ has done some investigation, or the DOJ has been investigated rather, and it says that they found 35 cases in which judges have specifically said what the government is providing is false information. It might intentionally be false information, including false sworn declarations, time and again, says Ryan Goodman, law professor at New York University. So, the Trump administration obviously has been doing a lot of work in the courts, a lot of prosecutions, a lot of cases, a lot of things happening in the courts. This investigation has found that perhaps the DOJ does not have its act together as much as people might have thought it did. So let's watch the clip.
So the judges are saying some incredible things.
Ryan Goodman is a law professor at New York University who heads a nonpartisan law journal. His team has analyzed hundreds of suits filed against the administration, and he didn't imagine what judges were saying to the Trump Justice Department.
We found over 35 cases in which the judges have specifically said, what the government is providing me is false information. It might be intentionally false information, including false sworn declarations time and again.
In court records compiled by Goodman, Democratic and Republican-appointed judges are critical of the Trump Justice Department's work. Highly misleading, said one judge. A serious violation of the court's order, wrote another. And a third warned, trust that had been earned over generations has been lost in weeks.
This isn't the way things normally proceed?
It's not. In fact, I would say for some of the cases that we're looking at, maybe that would happen once every 10 years.
Who gets hurt by this?
The one entity or person or institution gets hurt the most is the Justice Department.
So I was quite surprised when I came across this story. I hope Barry Weiss doesn't screw up this type of journalism at 60 Minutes, because this is no easy thing to do, and this is, the type of journalism that we need. It is, for one, providing false information to a court, especially a federal judge, even as a prosecutor, is a cause for, being sanctioned, being disbarred, you can be found in contempt of court. It's a quite serious thing. You can do many things in a courtroom, but lie to a judge during a case is not even in the top 1,000 things that you can do. And when I came across this story that they were investigating all these cases against the administration and the government was doing this, I was really appalled. And I went and watched the greater clip, which I'm not going to play for you. And it just gets so much worse. And that last quote is so stark. Trust that has been earned over generations has been lost in weeks. And I think the only good thing about this not only it being made public, because people won't care about this, but I think the fact that judges are figuring this out makes the legal, getting stuff through the legal system for the Trump administration so much harder. It makes the job so much harder. Now, I think that can be good for some things, maybe not good for others, but they're making their lives unnecessarily difficult. And one has to wonder, if they're doing all of this, maybe the case they don't have is that good. But they're supposed to go win it anyway. And so they're doing, they've just turned in the face of not having a case against who's suing them, they're just resorting to dishonesty. And if we needed another reason to not be a huge fan of Pam Bondi and the DOJ and all this type of thing, this is quite stark. I would encourage you, if you're very interested in the story, to head over to YouTube to the 60 Minutes channel and watch the greater segments, because it's quite stark. Traditionally, for the government, the federal government doesn't even bring a case. It used to be, unless they were sure that they would win. In the case of the government being sued, one of the reasons people tend not to sue the government is because they come with all the evidence, all the receipts, everything in a row. And if you're the person suing the government and your case isn't airtight, the government will destroy you in the better part of a half hour. We're now seeing a major departure from that, to where they're showing up with whatever, probably produced by AI, with whatever, and finding, judges complaining to be kind of like, this isn't good, this isn't right, go home, do your homework again, all this type of thing. I mean, like, it's a quite stark and shocking thing. So in closing, I'd encourage you to go watch that. So anyway, so I did 3 recordings today for the show. This is my 4th time talking, and my voice is bye birdie. So we're going to stop a little early. I want to thank everyone for watching. I really appreciate it. Thank you for bearing with me through technical issues. If you are a newsletter subscriber, you should finally have the newsletter in your inbox. It looks like it finally went out. That only took 3 days. So sorry for that. Today's interview is so good. Today's interview, I think we had Chloe Anagnos on Friday. And today's interview, we had Chloe Anagnos last week, we had Michael Stockholm, and then today we had, Hank Quentz, which is a very interesting interview. I had some very fascinating conversations with people today, including a big mainstream author named J.D. Barker, who writes thrillers, and he has an imprint at Simon & Schuster, and he publishes with HarperCollins. So that's a very exciting conversation I had today. They'll be out towards the later this year. But like I said, we have self-publishing with Hank Quentz. We get into all the self-publishing writing stuff this week. So that's a lot of fun. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. You can catch me on social media at Cameron Cowan or at Cameron Journal on all your favorite platforms. Please make sure to subscribe to the newsletter at CameronJournal.com. Sign up for the newsletter. It'll hopefully be to you on time on Saturday, and we'll catch up with you next week. This is the Newshour. I do it every Monday at 7, so come on by, tell your friends. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you next week. Good night.